Welcome to the revision session on social factors across Australia. The key knowledge that we will be focusing on is ways in which social factors across Australia, including education, income, location, accommodation, available time and cultural norms, influence food accessibility, food choice and healthy eating. The key skill for this area is analyse recent changes and current trends in food behaviours and analyse social factors that may influence healthy eating. Food accessibility, food choices and healthy eating. Food accessibility refers to the amount, quality, nutritional value and the variety of food that people can access. Food choices refer to our decisions about the food we eat. And healthy eating means eating a wide variety of foods from each of the 5 major food groups in the amounts recommended. Social factors across Australia. Australians' responses to food information, food accessibility, food choices and healthy eating are all influenced by interrelated social factors. These factors include education, income, location, accommodation, available time, and cultural norms. The first social factor that we will look into is education. Studies indicate that a person's education does influence their response to food information, food accessibility, food choices, and healthy eating. Education about food enables people to understand what foods are actually good for them and those that are not. And this education can start in the home, before school, and then continue on into primary school and of course secondary school. Education in food or education in general can actually give people the ability to comprehend and interpret food information. We hope that people are more likely to respond to the information by consuming healthy food in the right proportions. Generally, the higher the education someone has, the better their health tends to be. And it's not only influenced by their education, but it's influenced by other interrelated factors as well, such as income, where they live, the type of accommodation they have, and their income. But education can contribute to that. As a result of education, people are more likely to make informed choices about the food that they eat by accurately interpreting food labels, dieting information, and advertisements. They can apply practical, safe food preparation and cooking skills to make nutritious snacks and meals. They're being aware of ethical and environmental issues related to sustainability and doing their best to address them. Recognising discretionary food choices and understanding the impact of constant consumption of these foods on health and well-being. Understanding nutritional value of each of the 5 food groups and of also understanding the origins of their food. So people educated in food and nutrition, like we are as food studies students, are more likely to respond to food information by making nutritious food choices and developing lifelong healthy eating habits. Income is another social factor that can influence someone's access to food, food choices, and their healthy eating. Many people believe that those earning lower incomes can't afford to choose nutritious foods. Sometimes that can be true, but it's not entirely true. Some people may have only a little bit of money left to buy their food after they've paid for their utility bills and their rent or mortgage costs, and that may result in them buying cheaper food, but it's not always the case. Amanda Lee, who is a professor in public health at the University of Queensland, believes that Australians could actually pay less for groceries if they followed the Australian dietary guidelines. In her research, Amanda noted that many households spent more on groceries when they purchased highly processed foods than families that actually purchased fresh foods. So we can see in the first picture here, we've got 6 roll-ups that cost around about $4.50 each. We could also buy 6 apples for $4.50. So we can see clearly in this example here that people on lower incomes can actually source nutritious foods. However, this isn't always the case. People may have access to healthy food at an affordable price based on income. However, they still not be able to afford the most nutritious option or choice. And this is a really good example here where you've got 3-star beef mince at a cost of $8 compared to 5-star extra lean mince at $10.50. Another example is whole grain bread. In some varieties of whole grain bread are much more expensive than white bread. So income definitely has an impact on people's access to quality, nutritious food. The location where people live is another social factor that can influence their access to nutritious foods. In Australia, we have people that live in major cities, inner regional areas, outer regional, remote, and very remote areas. Unfortunately, the access to quality food can be limited by people's geographical location in Australia. People who live in the smaller, remote areas don't really have the access to affordable food that other people living closer to towns or cities may have. And that's because supermarket chains are less likely to establish shops in remote areas, mainly because transport, setup and running costs can just be too high. In these areas, people who need to buy food often end up having to drive long distances to get to a supermarket, or they have to use public transport. And if they're using public transport, the shoppers can't really transport large quantities of food or purchase fresh foods because the journey home is too long and the transport risk of foods becoming unsafe is too high. In those areas, in those remote areas where people have to travel long distances to get to shops, they often end up relying on convenience stores instead. And you can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a picture of a convenience store in a remote area of Australia. And we can actually see that there's very limited fresh food there available. The other information I have here is printed with permission from a person who posted something on a social media page of the foods that they have bought. This person was explaining that up to $700 is spent on fresh fruit, vegetables and fresh food on a fortnightly basis because they live in a remote area. They're paying for one cauliflower, they're paying $28.25. And for one orange costs just under $5. So people in remote areas are really paying a lot more for fresh fruit and vegetables and even meat than other people who are living in suburbs and cities and regional towns. People in suburbs and cities do tend to have access to shops that sell a variety of food, so they actually have access to a wide variety of nutritious foods. And also, again, that impact of income comes into play because research indicates that people living in wealthier locations actually have less fast food outlets available, and those that do exist tend to offer more nutritious food choices than those people living in outer or more disadvantaged areas. So location can actually have a huge impact on the type of food that you have access to. The type of accommodation we live in Australia can also affect our food choices. Australia's common housing types include standalone homes, terraces, semi-detached duplexes, townhouses and apartments. These kitchens in Australia tend to have your essential items like your stove, oven and refrigerator. Some of them even contain things like a dishwasher as well and a microwave. Other less common types of accommodations include residential care in aged homes, on-campus accommodation at university, shared rental accommodation, accommodation is in residential caravan parks and even emergency housing. And these smaller places may only have microwaves, sometimes they have undermount fridges and freezers, but they usually don't have dishwashers. The size and the appliances available in a kitchen impacts the type of food that people can store, prepare and cook. And this, to a certain extent, does influence people's food choices. So if the people are living in a small place, then they can't easily store food that well. Some low-income families end up homeless or living in emergency shelters, and they tend to rely on charity organisations to provide their nutritious meals. With no accommodation, they often can't cook their meals. They often have nowhere to store their groceries safely. They don't have a fridge. They might not have a freezer. They might not even have a safe place to eat. And their lack of access to accommodation results in food insecurity and poor nutrition. The last two social factors that we'll look at are available time and cultural norms. The amount of time people spend planning, shopping, storing, preparing, cooking and cleaning up meals in the home seems to be declining. People seem to have less time to prepare healthy food as they are busy nowadays with work, school commitments and also social activities. So this actually decreases the amount of time that people actually have to spend cooking, and often cooking a home-cooked meal each night can just be too stressful for some people. And they often end up having convenience food or serving their children things like chicken nuggets, which seems much easier and less stressful than making a nutritious homemade meal at the end of a long working day. People who do shift work tend to have less available time to prepare and cook nutritious meals, and that's mainly because their shift work can leave them feeling tired and disinterested in food preparation. So studies have indicated that shift workers tend to snack more, consume convenience meals that require reheating, and eat at regular times. They often tend to choose convenience or fast food meals rather than healthier eating options. And this often results in more foods being eaten that are convenient styles. There's a few things that are coming out on the market that actually help people with their available time and being able to prepare nutritious meals. Meal delivery kits are beginning to be designed for people who have no time to shop and very limited time even to plan meals. And all people have to do is to simply select the meals that they would like to eat that week and they're delivered to their door. Other appliances that are things like air fryers and the new Thermomix also help people save time in the kitchen. So there's a couple of different ways that consumers are able to find more time to prepare nutritious meals. Cultural norms are another social factor that affects people's food choices. Cultural norms refers to the standards, expectations and rules we live in by our communities. They're a standard set of behaviours within a group of people that are considered normal. And basically what it means is we look at what other people are eating within our social group and we tend to eat what they are eating. So we mimic them. If we spend time with people who eat a large amount of food, we are also inclined to eat the same quantity of food. If they eat smaller amounts, then we're more inclined to eat smaller amounts. If our peers are eating fast food at lunchtime, then we will also tend to eat fast food at lunchtime. Another way we can look at cultural norms is also about our cultural identity and the culture of which we come from. So often people who come from other countries, they use their food to maintain and express cultural norms within their group of people. Unfortunately, some new residents arriving in Australia are actually experiencing difficulty accessing food from their own culture. And that's one thing they actually find very difficult. Often they are at emergency shelters or they arrive and their location of their homes far away from markets that provide the food that they are familiar with. Sometimes they are given vouchers to spend at supermarkets, and when they go there, they're unable to read the packaging of information. So this makes it very hard to access nutritious foods. The Asylum Seeker Resource Centre has actually established a food bank for people in this situation that stocks food for refugees that are familiar to them and will actually help them overcome this problem. So cultural norms and meeting the cultural norms of the group of people that we belong to definitely can impact our food choices and our healthy eating. So that's a bit of an overview of how the social factors can influence our food choices, our access to food, and our healthy eating habits.